Hello and welcome. Let's talk tabletop. Today's question or query or topic comes from Samuel Callis. Like Callis from Bot and Katos. That was a pretty good game. The story sucked, but I loved that card battling system. Oh, it was amazing. Only they could have hired a good writer. Samuel says, how do you get information to your players without it being too boring, like an exposition dump style, or too subtle, like hints and visible descriptions? I still hit issues where my own world's backstory can be rough to put forth without it being either too blunt or too subtle. Any advice on that? Yes, a lot of the times when you play, like D&D or Pathfinder or like a fantasy style setting, your players are going to sit down and imagine like medieval Western Europe unless you tell them otherwise. So if you're opening like a new campaign setting, unfortunately it does kind of fall to you to do the exposition dump. I do like the 5-paragraph basically essay, and before anybody creates their characters, I say, hey, this is the world, this is what's unusual about it, this is where you're from, etc. Like, give them like 10 facts. That way it's like, you live on a desert world. Ah, shit, I put like 8 points into swim, and they gotta change things. You gotta give it to them beforehand so they have context. Otherwise, they're just going to expect castles, cities, dungeons, rivers, and temperate forests, because that's kind of the cookie cutter fantasy setting. So you got to tell them, oh, you're in a desert region. Oh, you're in a jungle region. Oh, you're going to be out on the ocean most of the time, and here's unusual stuff about that. The best thing you can do is say, okay, it's like medieval Western Europe, but, and you name 10 things. Make up holidays, make up things that are relevant to them. Don't go off into like trade laws and who the royal family is and all these different houses and things like that. Keep it to things that are going to be of interest to them. Like, say, let's think about something. Like if you're not the bride, you don't wear white to a wedding because it's rude. It's supposed to be her special day. You're supposed to be able to pick her out in a crowd because she's the only one wearing white, etc., etc. And that's like an unwritten rule of our society most of the time. If there's anything like that, that's a great thing to put in. Like men are not allowed to wear rings, or women are not allowed to wear closed-faced helms. It is rude to hide your beauty, or whatever it happens to be. It can be anything and everything, but like if there are taboos or traditions in your society, things that would affect the players, definitely give it to them before they even put pen to paper for their character creation. And then you, of course, have the gray box opening. Now, Samuel, I don't know how old you are, so I don't want to assume anything, but my audience in general, if you look into the old, like, D&D modules, if you remember, like, Sunless Citadel, for example, that's a classic one. When you're arriving to, Dunhurst, on the old gray road, it's got like this, on the page inside the module, it's got like this big gray box that kind of paints the picture for your players. And you kind of need to do that because, again, like I said before, it's medieval Western Europe unless you tell them otherwise. You start in a tavern. Well, okay, that's not very exciting. You start in a carriage, stuck in a bog somewhere. You thought you could get through easily, but the horses are having trouble getting through the gray muck, and weeping willows lean over you every which way. Give like 10 or 12 strong sentences before the players do anything, before they open their mouths. Paint a picture of where they are, because I know I can tell by your question, you're afraid of giving the big exposition dump, but D&D is a game of imagination, and if you don't say enough, you're not going to be able to portray where they are, how dangerous it is, or how welcoming it is. It could be just the opposite. It could be welcoming. It's your job to put the details in, and if you don't say the details, then they're not going to, it's just going to be a paint by numbers. So, if you've looked into any of the old modules, you'll always see gray box descriptions for like important rooms, or like, I don't remember, it was one of the starter boxes for 3.5. Leaves a gray box to describe like this kitchen where flour is spilled out over the ground somewhere, and you can see little paw prints everywhere, but they're not dogs and they're not cats, so there is something quadrupedal running around, and there's quite a lot of whatever it is, and it turns out to be like dire rats or something because it's a level 1 adventure. But you have to give them several sentences. You need to keep the description strong and flowing, and it might feel like an exposition dump that you're being too descriptive, and that really the thing is you can't be. Your players want to be a part of your world, and they can only see it in their mind's eye through the words that you say. There's also the if you played like Guild Wars 2, if you remember the vistas, in that MMO you could go to like certain spots that would like overlook regions, and there would be like a little floating map there, and you would go and tag the F button or whatever, and it would give you this big sweeping camera shot of the jungle you were in, the forest you were in, the city you were in, etc., etc. And it was exactly what it said it was. It was a vista. They called them vistas. So to get a good look at the region around you, there could be like 7 or 8 vista locations per region, and it would make sure that you saw all the beautiful artwork, all the beautiful buildings, all the beautiful whatever. Whenever your players get to a new, especially unusual locations like deserts or tundras, it's important to say, things like, yeah, if you wandered out into that stuff, the desert heat could kill a man in a day, and stuff like that. So, they'll know to dress better, to get sun oil, to stock up on those water skins and fire resist potions, etc., etc. You can drop important extreme environment details into your description of the environment itself. So, what else? Again, there's the before game essay where you're saying, here's where you are, here's who you are, based on their character sheets. Here's what you're doing, here's why. You are now at X. Go. And painting the picture, again, is the most important thing you can do. So, what else? There's other, like, more subtle things like notes, mail, journals. If you go through, like, if some alchemist goes missing and he keeps a journal on his bedside table, you can leave a few entries for that. Or, if your society is advanced enough, there's newspapers that tell them, they could just like walk by the kid that's selling them on the corner, extra, extra, read all about it. High sorcerer missing for 4 days. And that is a point of interest. They might buy a newspaper, you never know, and they could find out more information that way. That's voluntarily intaking an exposition dump, because that's what newspapers are. So, and then there's other ways like gossip in taverns. If all the bar wenches are talking about, so-and-so, the bard troupe was supposed to be here 3 weeks ago, but, the bog has been flooding lately with the rainy season extending weeks past what it did last year. I hope they're not stuck in the muck out there. And, your players are out to get some goblins that have been leaving big sharp rocks in the road. Well, hey, you might already know that you should be on the lookout for such and such bard troupe, so that's just a side thing. it lends some flavor to your setting. What else? There's also, if you're out hunting monsters, there's, if you've ever played like Monster Hunter World, they leave tracks, they leave poop, they leave claw marks to mark their territory. You can have your players guessing or extrapolating what kind of monster they are hunting in a forest setting, in whatever setting it happens to be, based on the trail they leave behind. That's a great way to kind of prepare them or make them afraid of whatever they're supposedly hunting for this bounty. You know, it could be a wanted poster with a big question mark on it, with claw marks going up and down it that the illustrator doesn't know what to draw, so it's like a mystery monster in the wood that's tearing open anybody that goes down this road. Can you go get it and kill it? What is it? We don't know. It kills everybody. There's also like the informational dump. Like, I keep looking at Exposition, and I do imagine, you know, you're sitting there, you have a lot of information you want to get to your players. You don't have to space it out, because again, you can give them like the setting before they make their character sheets. You can give them the start of the campaign with your gray box or whatever descriptions that they need when they enter a new area. You can describe anything unusual about where they're traveling to. You can describe NPCs talking amongst themselves. There's really no such thing as an exposition dump in D&D so long as you give it to them in written form. That's kind of a key thing, because if you've got several weeks between like session 0 when you're making characters and session 1 when everybody shows up ready, you know, if you've named a kingdom and a county and 7 towns and a religion and 5 important figures, you know, that's a lot of words, that's a lot of vocabulary that they may or may not want to memorize, but they can have it in front of them. So like whenever you mention that name, they can glance down, oh, that's so-and-so, the high priest of Pelor in this region. So okay, they know who you're talking about. Or you say, gosh, I haven't seen them since we met at such and such. They glance down, oh, that's a fishing town 10 miles from here. So if you're going to give them a lot of towns, a lot of names, a lot of things that you want them to remember to immerse them in the setting, it may be important to whip out the cue cards. It may be important to be like Legend of Zelda, where, you know, if they name a name or a place, it's like it's in green instead of black, or it's in red instead of black. So it's like, you know, Cecil Amzero is the high priest of Pelor, so Cecil Amzero would be written in red, and Pelor would be written in like white or cookie cutter letters because he's a god or whatever. So they can kind of glance through it and know what you're talking about if you are making up a lot of names and places. That way they don't get lost, they don't feel overwhelmed, and they're not like me being the smartass who raises his hand and goes, is this gonna be on the test? And, you know, you don't want that at your table. I think that's just about everything that I can think of as far as conveying information. I know you can kind of feel like it's an exposition dump, or you're not giving them enough. And really, like I said, my best advice is that if you insist on making up a lot of names and places, make sure they have it in written form, and never worry about describing too much, because that's exactly what D&D is. You're painting the picture with words, and if you don't have enough words, then they're just going to imagine like a bog standard medieval Western Europe kind of setting, and that's not what you want, because that's not what your setting is. So I hope that helps, Samuel. How about you guys? In the comments below, why don't you tell me how you conveyed like a lot of information all at once? Did you leave it as a mail letter or a journal, or do you use the gray box thing? Do you spend 5 minutes talking before the campaign starts to kind of set the mood? Do you hand out 5-paragraph essays like I do to describe the country, where they are, what they're doing, why? Just so they're kind of like they're geared up and they know which direction they're pointing when the game starts. What do you do before a campaign to kind of say, hey, this isn't just medieval Western Europe, here's what's unique about my world and why? What methods do you use? Let's talk tabletop. So, until next time, keep gaming.